Writer and producer Kalamu Yasalam also saw black with that perspective.
There's a whole level of brutal honesty that happens among people who frequent the streets as their favorite place to hang out. And when I say the streets, I don't mean that figuratively, I mean literally. People who just spend most of their time walking up and down the streets, hanging on a corner or something like that. They have a whole different way of expressing themselves. There are very few euphemisms. There's not much room for sentimentality. They've seen all kinds of stuff go down.
Clyde Kerr Jr.
He always wanted to give off this macho kind of thing, too, for whatever reason. I really think that was, like when people do that sometimes, it's really trying to hide their vulnerability, to keep from getting ripped off, get paid, or whatever. That's unfortunate. But all that made him who he was.
Sister Mary Burnett.
He had a bad temper, yes, but he had a very, very tender heart. He had a very good heart. A lot of people didn't see that side of him. I mean, I've seen him cry. He's told me a lot of things from his soul. He couldn't have wrote the music he wrote, the beautiful music he wrote, if he didn't have the tenderness in his heart.
Bassist James Hutch Hutchinson learned a lot playing with James Black in New Orleans before going on to play in Bonnie Raitt's band.
He was a very giving person. I mean, maybe not in a financial sense, but definitely as far as support goes and passing things on to younger players. I know he had a number of students he taught at his mom's house.
He taught us all a great higher understanding of what the drums can sound like.
Johnny Vodakovich.
He surely did for me. He taught me I could sit down behind the drums and be a composer, that the drum set was as big as an orchestra. You know, you could do everything from the smallest sound to the largest, ferocious, rude sound, and you could make beautiful sounds out of drums. And you can play them in a musical way that's definitely related exactly in a compositional context to what's going on musically, like that at the moment.
James Black's music was and continues to be powerful and intricate. But what was it that made it so? What made James Black's playing unique? Herlin Riley, drummer for the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra and a friend and student of James Black, sat down in Piety Street Studios in New Orleans to elucidate on Black's expertise.
Well, first of all, James, his rhythms were very, very tight. Unlike someone like, say, like Elvin Jones, his rhythms are very, very loose and kind of fluid. James, his rhythms were very precise. It was like precision. James played a lot of snare drum. His snare drum was very, very crisp, and also his bass drum was very, very crisp as well. James also played a lot of patterns. He would play the ride pattern on the cymbal, but underneath the cymbal, in the comp rhythms, he would play a lot of dialogue between the snare drum and the bass drum, whereby the snare drum and the bass drum would kind of interact with each other and have a dialogue underneath the ride pattern. It's just a straight ride pattern. Now underneath that, he would play stuff inside of that with the snare drum. And if you notice what I played the triplets. I played triplets on the snare drum. So he would play triplets, but he would kind of break the triplets up between the snare drum and the bass drum sometimes. So.
Herlin has some insights into Black's use of time signatures and unconventional meters.
Well, one thing I always say about playing in different time signatures is that you have to feel the pulse of the meter. So if you're playing in 5/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the strong beats of a 5/4 rhythm is 1 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So James was able to, I think, hear and feel the pulse of the rhythm, which allowed him to not have to count out the 5/4. He wouldn't have to count it. He would just feel the pulse of that particular meter. So he could play inside of the pulse of the meter. And then playing inside of the pulse of the meter, you don't have to always play the 1 or the 4. You know, you can kind of start off playing 1 and 4, but then you can get away from that. For instance, you play 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Hurlin also has some comments on James Black's harmonic techniques.
Well, I think his utilization of intervals and how he was able to just hear certain intervals to make them all very logical and not sound contrived. And I think it doesn't sound like he's really going for anything that's outside the natural progression of things. For instance, how he composed intervals that he uses on Magnolia Triangle. That's very, very unique. I've never heard a bridge like that. The beginning of it is kind of like a vamp, and it's very bluesy. You know, the vamp is... That's blues. And here's where it's tricky. The bridge. Inside of that bridge, the intervals that he uses in the melody is they're just killing. For instance, he goes. That's so bad. And pieces like Magnolia Triangle, that kind of stuff, I think that sounds just like James's music to me. It doesn't sound like anybody else's music.
As Black continued working into the 1980s, fellow musicians working with him noticed subtle changes in his life and music. Ramsey McLean.
He kept sinking further and further into drug addiction. This is a small town, basically. It's certainly in the music community, and he just wore out his welcome with pretty much everybody.
Pianist Larry Siebert played with Black in Ramsey McLean's band, The Lifers.
Yeah, he just really liked to get high, I guess. As with a lot of jazz greats, that was something that was really important.
Pianist Angèle Trosclair played with James during transitional periods in his life.
When I knew James, he quit cold turkey. I do know that he was taking methadone at that time, so whatever he did, that was really his own business. It was a tough struggle for him, and after a point, I don't know, he might have gone a different direction, but when I knew him, in fact, he was like, he acted to me like one of the straightest people on him.
Everybody was doing drugs then.
James Hutch Hutchins.
I mean, it was pervasive. Back then, it was all across the board. It was before rehab. It was before people decided to turn their lives around. Everybody was still pretty young. It was a different world. I think James was doing heroin and coke is what he was doing, as far as I could see. I mean, everybody was partying. It was just those days. Late 70s, early 80s, it was no holds barred. And just about everywhere, too, especially in music communities. But I think it was even permeated society to a certain extent back then. The corporate boardroom, like all the way across. I don't think there was any remorse. I mean, that's why the cat isn't with us today. And I think if he had been able to make a decision to change his life about, and he actually consciously made that decision, I don't think you could have stopped him, because he was a very strong-willed cat.